Hello. As they said, I'm Susan Forney from Hurricane Electric, and I'm here to talk to you about peering security. Some of this stuff is covered in the lightning talk. I'm usually not fortunate enough to follow somebody talking about peering DB, for example, so, but just bear with me because I didn't know it was going to come in front of me. Hurricane Electric is known for being on the most peering exchanges. We participate in more exchanges than anybody else, and that's one of the reasons why I want to talk to you about peering security today. We are in 206 exchanges, and if you don't peer with us now, talk to me afterwards, and we can take care of that. So why should you be worried about peering security? Because a peering connection is really not much safer than the ports that you expose to the internet. It's true that not anyone, there's not a path for anyone to get there, but you are on a peering exchange with a lot of other networks, so it's not really that safe. And because of that, that peering port can be a very convenient backdoor to your network. Because the internet as a whole is getting a lot more serious about security, it's probably time to take a very critical look at your peering sessions and see what you could do to tighten them up a little bit. So let's start by reviewing the basics. The basic defenses for an exchange port are logical port security, routing security, and then best practices to maintain these things. So let's start with port security. Your IX port exposes your networks to security risks that are inherent with a layer 2 port. First, don't connect an interface with a default configuration to an internet exchange. Dozens, hundreds sometimes of networks are connected to that exchange, and while most of the time they are like people in this room, very nice, friendly, trustworthy, you cannot trust everyone on an internet exchange, and so your configuration on your port should not be your IP address and nothing else. Many IXPs will post their recommended port configurations like HKICS and AM6. A lot of them have places on their websites that explain to you that is for configurations that they recommend. Most IXs will only allow unicast traffic. Once upon a time, before there was IPv6, that was a good idea. Now, IPv6 neighbor discovery is an exception, and they need multicast traffic, obviously, to discover IPv6 neighbors. So if you also, you should be configuring ACLs on your interfaces. IPv4 and IPv6 ACLs, don't forget v6. Rule of thumb is permit traffic from the IX subnet to the IX subnet, deny traffic from any place else to the IX subnet, and then just permit everything place else. That prevents you from getting some unexpected communication on your port that you don't really want. And then I thought I'd go through just what, I took a list from various IXs about things that they recommend for port security. Don't forget, if you're Cisco, no CDP enable. If you're not, no LLDP. There's no reason to expose your port to that. No MOP enable. UDLD port disable. No IP directed broadcasts. No IP redirects. No IP proxy ARPs. All these things that you've heard about before, but if you look on your ports on the internet exchange and you do not have these things configured on your interface, I would suggest that you clean it up. Also, don't forget your IPv6 to lock down your IPv6 protocols as well. And all this, you're thinking, maybe this isn't so important. So I want to tell you a little story about once upon a time when I worked at Microsoft. And this was actually not an Ethernet protocol, but it gives you an idea of what can happen. So once upon a time, there was a legacy X.25 port that had to be moved to a new piece of equipment, and they couldn't decommission the service that was on it, so they were forced to move it. When they moved the piece of equipment, even back in those days, X.25 was an old protocol, and the engineer moving it was not incredibly familiar with it. And the piece of equipment that he was moving it to configured a little bit differently than where he had moved it from. And so the in order to replicate the port configuration, he had to use different commands. And the ones he tried didn't work. And so he just left them off because, well, I don't know what they are, didn't bother to look them up, and it's an old protocol. It'll be okay. Well, what happened was that X.25 actually in some third world countries was an up-and-coming protocol that a lot of people knew how to exploit. And one of those people got onto the network and exploited that protocol. And then I could tell you a sad little story about why you do not telnet into your Unix boxes and why you do not log into your Unix boxes with root. Because when someone gets on your network and finds these things out, it makes it very easy for someone to own something. And in this case, they owned the monitoring server for the network and were able to get access to a lot of interesting things before they were discovered, and everything had to have the plug pulled on it. So if you would like that not to happen to you, please lock down your ports. For routing security, this is important in two directions: for the routes that you get from people, and then the routes that you are announcing to other people. So let's start by talking about the routes that you get. Your IXP is going to protect its infrastructure, and they're responsible for that. But you're the only one who can prevent routing leaks. You can get them on a peering interface just as easily from a transfer provider, and you really need to think about this carefully on your peering port to lock this down. The IXLAN is not internet routed IP space, and that /24 or 22, whatever it is, should not be advertised by anyone else, or least of all accepted by you. And you would think this actually doesn't happen, but unfortunately it does. And to give you an idea, like here is a JNAP in Tokyo, and right here you can see this is our address, and I just put it up here for illustration: 210.173.176.106. There we go. Okay, then now look at this. Here is something that we pulled off the actual internet, because this is where everything in bgp.he.net comes from. It's just internet routing tables. We didn't make this up. Here is that 24. 210.173.176/24 being originated by AS18403. And probably by accident, we're not here to make fun of anybody, but they were advertising, one, they were advertising that prefix on the internet, and two, people were accepting it. So you can see from the icons on the slide here, it did not have a valid route origin, obviously, because it's not their prefix, and it didn't have valid IRR records, and yet there it is floating around the internet and it being leaked. So one of the ways you can take control of the routes you receive is by installing prefix filters, and that's a good idea for what I'm going to get into. You can also use AS path filters to prevent leaks, and this is largely by filtering out routes that are advertised by other large major ISPs, and if you're not sure who they are, I go into that a little bit later too. And then you can limit your peers to a maximum number of prefixes. All of these things will help you control your routes. So most networks do not filter their peers. And right now, I guess I'd like to ask you, how many people in this room put a prefix filter on every single peer that they connect to on an IX port? I hope by the time I'm finished talking to you that everybody in this room will want to raise their hand after they do this. So, this, unfortunately, not putting those prefix filters in not only hurts you, but it hurts the internet as well. So you would want to filter routes, create filters that only allow routes with valid origins and authorized advertisements. And you should have them on be applying those to every single peer you have. You can automate filter generation to make it a little bit easier to do, and there are free tools like BGP-Q3 that will do most of the work for you, so it isn't really hard to do this. When you create a filter also, you should be checking that filter against services like Spamhaus to make sure that someone's not advertising you a blocked prefix that you should not be accepting. So to give you an idea why this matters, on December 28th, just last year, China Telecom hijacked a U.S. Department of Energy prefix, this /24, 192.208.19/24, and did not correct the problem for 6 days. You can see here that both of these networks were originating the AS. Both China Telecom at AS 4812 and the U.S. Department of Energy in AS 32082. So this is a really good reason why you should be filtering, because if everyone had been filtering, obviously, it wouldn't have mattered if China Telecom had hijacked the prefix. Actually, what would have happened was nobody would have had that prefix at all, because as it turns out, not even the U.S. Department of Energy had their prefix properly documented. They had an invalid origin on it, as it turns out. Right here you can see that they were advertising the prefix with AS32982. The U.S. Department of Energy has, this Western Area Power Administration is actually part of the DOE, and they have more than one AS. And so when you look in the who is, actually, the origin AS on that was 36404. So that's just an example of how IRR records, problems happen to everybody, but you should be filtering those things and only accepting advertisements of things that are documented properly. Because when you do that, then everyone's going to have to document if they want to get to your network. So AS path filters also can help you prevent leaks and other routing issues. In most cases, you should not be accepting routes from your peers that have major ISPs in their path. If someone's re-advertising a route to you that has, NTT or, Telia or Cogent or somebody like that in the path, you probably shouldn't be accepting it. You should probably be getting those routes either from your transit provider or from those networks themselves if you're getting transit from them. If you don't know what those AS numbers are and what you should be filtering for, bgp.he.net can help you. Like, I just grabbed this right here from this one network here, Mythic Beasts, that actually happens to peer mostly with a few transit providers that link up to most of the major networks. And so even if you didn't know what all of those things you were going to put in your path filter should be, this would give you a good place to start. Maximum prefix limits are another tool that's going to help you prevent route leaks in your network, and you should put them in place. Most of your peers will specify their suggested prefix limits on peeringdb.com, and I was fortunate to be following the peeringdb.com presentation. Hopefully after that talk you are convinced it's really important to put all of your network information in there, but this is a really good reason why you should, because that way people can set peering up with you and adjust the prefix limits and make sure that your routes get through. If you don't have your prefix limits documented on peeringdb.com, today would be a great day to do that. Get yourself an account and log your routing information on peeringdb.com. To give you an idea why maximum prefix limits, if you don't have them set, again, like everybody in this room has maximum prefix limits set for every peer that they peer with on Exchange, right? Okay, so not everybody's nodding their head. So let me tell you why you should do this. So once upon a time when I worked at in a big telco hotel where I would see lots of other network providers wandering in and out at all hours of the day, I was coming in early in the morning for not working on a maintenance window, and the elevator door opens and out crawls one of my friends from another company who's has obviously been up all night and looks like something terrible's happened. And I said, what was wrong? And he said, one of my peers re-advertised the internet to me. And I looked at him and I said, didn't you have maximum prefix limits on your peers? He said, I do now. So don't let that be you. If there's anybody in this room who has not put a maximum prefix limit on their peer, do it now. Save yourself. It's not worth it. Okay, so the next task, now that you've got all of the routes coming in locked down, you need to secure the routes that you announce. And Leaks are easy to prevent if you create prefix lists or use communities to manage your advertisements. You should be very prescriptive about what you're sending to other people so that you don't accidentally advertise your transit provider's routes to somebody else. Best practice is to advertise only or directly learn routes to your peers. Of course, it's a free country. You can do whatever you want, but that's best practice. Be sure that you are advertising routes with valid IR records. If you don't know, bgp.he.net is a great way to check. So this is an example of, again, our friends from Mythic Beasts who have documented all their routes perfectly. So you can see that they all have nice green check marks for their IRR records, that some of them they've already created valid ROAs for. That's what that little key symbol is for. And so my hope is that when you are when you go into a service, a site like this, that you see that all of your records are just exactly like this, so that you know that you are advertising your routes correctly. I would caution you that appearances matter. You should check your route announcements. You shouldn't be leaking announcements that are smaller than a 24. You shouldn't be advertising bogons. You shouldn't be advertising your private IP space. RFC 1918 space should not be advertised. And the reason for that is like if your peer looks at your advertisements and they see all of this cruft in there, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that you know what you're doing with your network. So clean up your advertisements and put on your first best impression so that people think that you know what you're doing. Also, advertise all of the IP space that you are allocated, even if you don't currently use it. And this is really important because people hijack IP space that is not advertised. And there was a really good talk that unfortunately was not recorded at Links 101 about how spammers are taking unadvertised IP space and advertising it in bursts, sometimes as short as 20 minutes at a time. And then they use that IP space and then they yank the advertisements. And of course, this happens for a lot of reasons. One, because people aren't filtering things that shouldn't, that don't have valid route origins and allow it to happen. But it's also very common to do it on peering interfaces because they aren't highly regulated and they are great backdoors. And then that just exposes your network to all of this stuff that you don't really want. So, if you have prefixes you've been allocated, even though you're not using them, you should be advertising them and making sure that this can't happen to you. So your peering connection is a target for DDoS attacks. How many people have experienced a DDoS attack over their peering connection? Yeah, see? So one of the problems with peering connections is like some people will support black hole communities on their peering sessions. A lot of people won't. I would suggest that you set these up in advance. And a quick way to get around the fact that somebody won't accept your /32 is just pull the entire prefix, the 24, the 23, whatever it is you're advertising with that 32 in there for your peers. You're not going to get that much more bills in transit costs because you're not putting that across the back end, and it will keep your network from going down. But a lot of people don't think about that. So just set that up in advance so that when you put in the community to get rid of that 32, that from your peering sessions you also yank the larger prefix so that your network can survive that DDoS attack. Applying these kind of best practices is the kind of thing that keeps your network online during attacks. And then you should validate that your routes are being advertised to your peers as expected. And looking glasses and route servers can provide you with some visibility of that. But you should look to make sure that the routes that you're advertising to your peers really are, that the traffic, it really is going to all of those places that are going to save you so much money on your transit bills. There may be some reasons why your peers are not accepting your routes. There may be a filter in place that's wrong, or there's something wrong with the configuration on their side, or maybe you're not advertising things the way you think you should. So check those things out and communicate with your peers to make sure that you're getting what you think you are. And contact your peers when there's an issue. Again, this is a great reason why you should be registered in PeeringDB, because That way, everyone can get a hold of you, and you can get a hold of everyone else. For Hurricane Electric peers, routingdb.net can help you determine if your prefixes are being denied. We actually filter 100% of our peers, so if a route advertisement doesn't have a correct origin or a valid ROA record, it won't be accepted. So giving an idea of how that works, fortunately our friends at Cloudflare work, and we're not trying to be disrespectful or anything, they were kind enough to let us do this, I have an example here of what happens. So here we can see in this record that they are AS1335, and there they are, Cloudflare. And then we go in here and we see that you can see that this shows where the prefixes are, the number of lines in the prefixes that are accepted in the filter, and the number of the prefixes are received, so we're good there. And then we look at this peer, and we see that 266 of those routes are being filtered. I don't know what's going on there. So we keep going, and we find out that then you can look at the filter itself. And if it says it's an external route and there's an F byte, well, it means it's being filtered. And so we look at that route there. That's 66, 235, 200, 0.24, AS path 13335. Oh, I wonder what's wrong with it. Oh, well, when I look it up in RADB, it's not their route. They were misadvertising the route, and it really belongs to AS38082. And because of that, it's not being accepted. So, there may be other reasons why your routes aren't accepted by your peers, but this is, a good exercise to go through and figure out whether or not the things that you're advertising really are, what they're supposed to be. And in this case, I'm sure they didn't know that this was occurring, so until they, cleaned it up. And you can read more about how our routing algorithms work at routing.he.net. And examples of why routings are rejected is if they don't strictly match IRR policy or RIR handles. Like that second route is accepted because it does match. So all that's going to be in there. So only you can ensure that route registries correctly reflect your network. I get this all the time. People call me up and their routes are being rejected. They go, can you fix that? No, I can't. You have to go to the registry and fix this yourself, and it's really important that you do that. That's how we're going to keep the network more secure, the internet more secure. So please check your IR records and correct anything that is invalid. If you peer with Hurricane Electric, again, you can check it at routing.he.net. External monitors can help you detect leaks or hijacks. They can monitor how your prefixes are routed and let you know if paths change in a way that you aren't expecting. And this is actually kind of a good idea because it's always nice to see how the rest of the world views your network. One example of a free monitoring service is bgpmon.net, and they will monitor and give you notification of when errors occur for up to 5 prefixes for free per month. So it's kind of a nice thing to take advantage of. And I've got a slide here that shows you of a sample email that you would get if they found something that you weren't expecting. So this can alert you in advance to a problem in case somebody's hijacking a prefix. Other good security practices that your network can adopt are found in manners. And the first one, coordination, again, it's just, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to put all of your contact information in a place where it's readily available. And when you peer with somebody, make sure that you know where their contact information is. If, heaven forbid, they are not in peeringdb.com, then make sure you get their contact information so that you can get a hold of them in a case of a problem. Also, make sure that you're global, you're correctly validating your routes in terms of IRR records and RPKI. Make sure that you're implementing the manners anti-spoofing recommendations, and you can go straight to www.manners.org. If you're not familiar with everything, there's lots of interesting information out there, and I would heartily suggest that you go and take advantage of that. Lastly, try to protect what you have worked so hard to achieve. Put processes in place to make sure that all of your deployments are secure. And guard against social engineering, because the thing is that when these things work, like filtering and IR records and ROAs and all those things work, there's only one way to bypass them, and that's to convince you to not to break your own rules. And actually, this just happened to me. This happens very frequently, and I just ran into myself on Monday where someone, I saw an email where someone was trying to get us to accept a prefix that was not allocated in any of the registries. There was an unallocated prefix, and they were trying to social engineer their way to get that prefix to be accepted. And that is how they attack your network: is they get IP space that doesn't belong to them, and they get you to advertise it. So don't let this happen to you. Make sure that the people who are guarding your back doors in your NOC and all of your engineers know your processes, and make sure that nobody breaks them, and make sure they follow them so that this doesn't happen to you. So that's all I have for today. And does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Hoge and Nordernet. So great presentation. Thank you, Susan. When will you be starting working for Hurricane Electric and fixing this for Hurricane Electric?
Well, at Hurricane Electric, we never claim to be perfect.
I mean, Hurricane Electric has been the one-stop shop for routing hijacks for the last 15 years. So it is good that you're doing this, and we're looking forward to you fixing this. But it's going to be interesting to see when it's happening. And I didn't see in a presentation regarding RPKI. Will you be dropping RPKI invalids, for example, this year?
We're in the process of putting that thing in place. One of the things you've seen is that we are actually putting that into BGP.net, where we validate, note where we have valid ROAs so that we can do RPKI, and it is something that we plan to implement eventually, but it isn't in place yet. But we are filtering 100% of our peers, which is like, that little routing leak we had last November, which is why Hurricane Electric wasn't part of it, because we were filtering and it didn't get into our network. So, we are improving and are getting better, and, trying to make the internet, try to help everyone make the internet stronger every day. And like I said, though, unfortunately, we're not perfect.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mohammed, and I'm from DKNOG. I have a question regarding hijacking.
Yes.
Now, less than a month ago, we've been hijacked by an Iranian ISP. Now, we do ensure what we advertise, and our peer also ensures what is being advertised to us, and we do have RPKI and all of that. But when an ISP advertises an address which looks like ours, but more specific prefix, and the whole world accepts it, how do you protect yourself from something like that?
Well, I think that then that is a problem. But I think that actually right now the whole world isn't accepting that, because I can tell you, I think that our friend from NTT over there will tell you that unless that object has a valid origin, that their network will not accept it. And that is how we protect against that, is that if everybody was doing that, if everybody refused to accept that more specific route because it had an invalid origin and didn't have correct IRR records, then that wouldn't happen. And that's the only way to protect against it. That's the reason why we need to start doing this stuff if you're not doing it already, because it's the only way that you're going to prevent people like you from being victimized.
Job Snijders, NTT. Twice you mentioned that you filter 100% of your peers, but this is not correct. For instance, you're not filtering us, so maybe you filter 90%,
We filter E with the AS path filter.
but no prefixes are rejected.
Well,
Anyway,
I would
that's
say
not what
that's
I wanted
probably
to
true, but
focus on.
it's still filtering.
Okay. I have a small challenge for you as a company. You use a network operating system from Extreme, and that doesn't support origin validation, unfortunately. This will make it harder for you as an organization to support RPKI origin validation, despite your best intentions, if you cannot configure it on the devices. There's a small trick, however. You could apply something called reactive origin validation. If you have a collector hanging off your BTP mesh and it spots an RPKI invalid announcement, it could push into the network a prefix filter that denies that invalid announcement, which means you could fully automated react within 5 to 10 minutes to invalid announcements. And my challenge to you would be that after many years of suboptimal routing, Hurricane leaps forward to become a leader in this problem space rather than a follower. Please be one of the first large carriers to implement origin validation, despite your operating system not being able to do so through normal means.
What's the question?
Try to be one of the first networks to implement origin validation rather than one of the followers.
Okay, well, thank you.
Are there other questions?
No? Well, thank you very much, Susan, for this presentation. Please do a big hand.